And so we started to have these cloud databases, and we started to have these, cloud identity systems and cloud search engines and cloud message queues. And that's all great until you realize that like every developer needs their own sort of isolated version of that when they're coding, right? Because like, let's say I need to try something new and I need to put a bunch of messages on the queue. Certainly can't use the production system. I could go create my own little dev tenant or dev account. Then I have to configure it and make sure it's good. Then I have to figure out how to reset it. If you have 100 developers and they're all kind of banging away at things, you have to have 100 of those things.
And a land of heat and a land of humidity, spanning 25 or so counties across 5 regions of the state, is the Ohio Valley, where Yvonne is in her shed pressure cooking at the moment. It's so hot. I also am near the Ohio Valley, and I'm frying in this humidity. How's it going, Yvonne?
It's good. I am making sure I use my humidity reduction setting out here in the shed. Just in case you wonder, for me, like 77 and 25% humidity is perfect. Like if I can get the room like that, it feels great because it doesn't feel hot, doesn't feel cold, but that is a delicate state to achieve when it is.
Yeah, so like 100 degrees with a whole bunch of humidities, no good, is it?
No bueno. Yeah, that's all right. I still would prefer it to 15 outside, so I'll take it.
So today with us is a founder and a CEO who's pushing the boundaries and innovation in a space that many of us, me definitely, usually avoid, because of its complexity. It's one of those things that I don't want to build myself, that's for sure. And that is customer identity and access management. Welcome to the show, Brian. How you doing?
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. And you're somewhere where there's not a lot of humidity right now, correct? So you're having a nice day?
Yeah, it's very dry in Colorado, although we've had a ton of rain, and I mean, we spiked like 80% humidity a few days here and there, which is shocking, like totally unheard of for Colorado. So everyone's like, why is it so hot? Because usually it can be 100 outside and you're like, it's pretty hot, but it's not that bad. Now it's just oppressive.
And that elevation, I don't know how you breathe, right?
Exactly. And you're closer to the sun, so you just get torched. So yeah.
Yeah. I grew up, so I'm from Arizona originally, and it's drier heat there. So where we're at now, it's humidity every year. It's just so heavy. It's different. Like you can go outside and like, Tucson or just different places in Arizona, you can run a few miles and you're just like, you're not even like sweating that much. And here it's like, okay, if I want to run around the block for like 5 seconds, I'm drenched. It's such a difference. But anyway, beyond the weather, thanks for coming on. And one thing I love hearing about is just the stories of, there's a lot of just brilliant founders out there. A lot of them started off coding, or they had something in their childhood that really like sparked some crazy interest and got them going and, set them on their journey. But yeah, that's, I guess, where I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind, is your journey. I understand you started coding at pretty early age on an Apple IIe, like we discussed before we started recording. But how did that early experience, kind of shape your approach to building developer tools? And, what was that like?
Yeah, I did. I started pretty early, about 10, and we had Apple computers at my school, and you kind of had to sign up for them. And so like a lot of people just didn't care, a lot of the kids, but I was like constantly wanting to get computer time. And we actually had a teacher who knew how to program. And so he sat down with students and like helped teach them how to program and show them basic and, how everything worked. And I don't know why, I just like clicked, and I loved it. And so I was trying to spend as much time as I could sitting in front of those computers and coding. And then my parents bought an 8086 and kind of did the same thing, right? And so I've been, tinkering and messing around with computers and programming for, a really long time. And then I actually went to college, and it was interesting because I was like, yeah, programming, it's getting kind of old. I mean, maybe I'll try something new. Because I programmed in high school. I actually like programmed and got paid in high school for some of the things I was writing. Took every programming class I could in high school, which was like Pascal and C. And then I just figured, well, I'll try something new. So I went to CU and tried electrical engineering, right? And I'm like, oh, it's similar. I'll try this. After like 2 years, I was like, oh my God, these circuits, they are just so lame. And I don't want to do this math. The math, it's just like the second you're into differential equations. So I'm like, I'm out. Bye. So I actually switched majors halfway through and went back to computers, but I had already done half EE. And so I kind of did this hybrid degree. So it was like half CS, half electrical. And, we still did like digital circuits and some of those things. So came out with a computer engineering degree. So CE, or ECE is what it was called back then. And yeah, so then I graduated from CU. And then I just, did what most folks do. I went and got a job, bounced around a little bit. This was during the dot bomb. So like everything sort of crashed right as I'm coming out of school. But I managed to, find different jobs at various places, including BEA, back when it was BEA before Oracle bought them. Then we moved to Chicago, and I worked at Orbitz. I was kind of fortunate there and had the chance to work with a great group of folks building a pretty high performance system, right? So Orbitz not only did they do just their website and selling tickets and hotels and all those things, but they are also the back of, a lot of the airlines originally, where all their ticketing systems and flight travel systems, where it's like go from leg to leg to leg, those were backed by the technology at Orbitz. And so that was a really great experience because I learned how to deal with, millions of transactions per day or billions, where most people, especially back then, thought in like thousands. And the way that we architected software and built the systems back then was quite different, right? And it's all bare metal. You got to think about actual hardware load balancers, and you got to think about like how you're going to get requests in and out and statefulness. And, it's just completely different. So I really learned a lot there. And sort of this whole time I, was, all of my parents and my grandparents, all entrepreneurs, all had their own businesses. And I always knew that I kind of wanted to do something myself. I tinkered with it in college. We started a business and that failed, but it just kind of stuck with me. And I'm like, I really want to build something. And so I came up with an idea. We moved back from Chicago. I worked on the idea nights and weekends, and then eventually I launched it. And that was the first product that I built, which was called CleanSpeak. And so CleanSpeak was a profanity filter and moderation tool. And that still exists today. Still have plenty of customers using it, and they're great. But I worked on that and helped, tried to build that out for about 10 years. And I sort of did all of that, just again, building it nights and weekends, just trying to figure it out. Waited until people paid me, hiring a few people here and there. And so it was a very slow roll in a very niche market. Tried to get it to scale, really couldn't. And then we sat down in a room and said like, hey, what are we going to build next? And, long story short, we tried a bunch of different things, but in the end, we actually ended up with FusionAuth, or what became FusionAuth. And so that was right around in like the 16, 17 timeframe. Worked on that for a little while and then launched FusionAuth into 2018, and then sort of watched that thing grow the way it's been growing lately. So pretty exciting journey.
Yeah, I didn't know much about CleanSpeak, but that's such an interesting. So it's funny, like when I first had kids and they started watching some stuff, and there was some things that are like, okay, there's some kind of inappropriate language, but this is still a cool thing. I tried to write this. I actually took subtitles and then tried to use Python And I had like a list of words that I would just add to it. But the problem that I ran into, and it just died, but like the delay before and after the word. And then once these delays would add up and then I couldn't get them to resync. This was like a while back, but it's like, okay, I'm not smart enough to do this, or I don't have enough time. It was actually fairly difficult to take some random piece of content from the subtitles and then take out a set of words. It was challenging.
Very, very challenging. And then subtitles are pretty well formed. When you talk about like text or forums or chat or anything like that, it's very unformed, right? So it's like, it's really, really hard to determine what people's context and meaning, and like, even when you're just typing random characters, like, is that character a bad word stitched together or not? So it's actually a really complicated problem, which it was fun to build, but yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you talk about, your early days. I get nostalgic when I hear the Apple IIe, because Apple IIe in BASIC, and a science teacher who wanted to teach a summer program in computer programming was my introduction to computers as well. And for those of us that are parents, I think that should just remind us to like encourage our kids to explore the world around them, and the things that they have interest in, in that 8 to 12 range, it could very well turn out to be something very meaningful and long-term for them. And even in my early 20s, I don't think my family understood, the career path I was choosing and the value of it. They really wanted me to do engineering, and I'm like, no, this is what I want to do. It was a really great experience. But it's something that so many of us who are now, long timers in the industry, it's how we started.
Yeah. So my parents actually enrolled me in code camp, which like back in the 80s. And that kind of like just even added on to it, where, every day for, I think it was maybe 2 weeks, we just go to this, studio where they had 50 computers set up, and then just a bunch of kids would go and cram in there and code on Apple IIes, right? And so, yeah, my parents certainly encouraged me to do things that were non-traditional back then, for sure.
Yeah.
I know a lot of kids were playing sports and doing other things in the summer. And my parents were like, hey, you want to code? And yeah, I'll figure out how to get you to somewhere where you can learn to code. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we bought an Apple IIe in the mid 80s, and we were like working class folks. So it was a big deal. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, yeah. Computers back then were, expensive and, hard to set up. And like my parents bought that 8086, and then we had to have somebody come in. We could have figured it out, but like my dad's like, oh, we're going to get somebody to install it, and it's like this monster machine, and figure out where all the cables go and stuff. But yeah, it was wild back then.
That's incredible. My journey was a little bit different, but my parents didn't think technology was like real. They're like, you can't this is not a career path. It's like, it was like a hobby, and started making some money, and they're like, oh, wait, it is real. Okay.
I made a website for their farm, and they started getting contacts from it. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. What is this thing? What is this internet thing? Yeah.
So in one of I want to get to this first, because it was like the thing that's most interesting to me, I think, as far as like some of the research and questions that I was coming up with. But in one of the blogs, I think, now that I think about it, I think it was on the FusionAuth website. I think it was about like revenue growth or something. But I read an interesting quote from you that basically, I just want to highlight this and, talk about it. I think it's interesting. But you basically said, solutions that are like multi-tenant software as a service, they can only let you down in the end when it comes to like local testing and development. And it's contrary to what a lot of founders, startup pitches, like the must-haves, up until recently, I've noticed the past year or two, in talking to like a lot of CEOs, they will always hype like multi-tenancy as the value proposition. Like, oh, we're multi-tenancy, check, gotta love our product. But I'd love to dig into the other side of that with you. Why single tenancy? What does that mean? And just sort of, how did you formulate that?
So the industry is interesting, right? Because like Salesforce started, kind of really claimed that model and really built around it, which is that multi-tenant cloud only SaaS, as I like to call it. And so, that's a tool for sales folks and marketing folks. And from that perspective, it totally makes sense. Throw something up, you get, all of these economies of scale where we can, have thousands of customers on a smaller set of hardware, and we can scale it up, and we basically can provide this great service, and it doesn't cost us a ton of money in servers and infrastructure and all that. I mean, it still does, but not nearly as much as running that a duplicate for every single customer. And somehow the industry conflated that model with what like a standard software engineer or software development lifecycle looks like. And I think to the detriment of actual developers, right? And so we started to have these cloud databases, and we started to have these, cloud identity systems and cloud search engines and cloud message queues. And that's all great until you realize that like every developer needs their own sort of isolated version of that when they're coding, right? Because like, let's say I need to try something new and I need to put a bunch of messages on the queue. Certainly can't use the production system. I could go create my own little dev tenant or dev account. Then I have to configure it and make sure it's good. Then I have to figure out how to reset it. If you have 100 developers and they're all kind of banging away at things, you have to have 100 of those things. And so we sort of forgot that like, software that we integrate into our systems used to just run on our laptops. And it's a lot of it still does, right? So like MySQL and even those message queues you can run locally. You can run a lot of these systems locally, but like the move towards like everything is in the cloud and everything's multi-tenant SaaS, I think it did a little bit of a disservice to developers. So I wanted to bring it back. I wanted to basically say like, hey, you can run this on your laptop and you can dev on it just like you would MySQL, but you can also run it in the cloud and if you need to, right? It can look like that same thing that you've kind of been like more accustomed to using. And so we call that our hybrid approach, which is the software runs anywhere. It's the same if it's on your laptop than if it's in the cloud. And so that's kind of our approach to that problem.
I love that. And I think it really is. So just an example with me, just building a few things in the past few months. Like one thing that I got really irritated with, I would say, with a project that I was working on that was 100% in the cloud, and the pipelines that we had set up that we're using GitHub Actions. Of course, we're doing it like on every, not just like merged to like a main branch, but like everything that's getting merged anywhere. Like the way that it was set up, we're just running a lot of testing and it's taking a lot of time. And, we're running in, we're building a few new things and we're just running into problems. And, these pipelines are just taking forever. So we're waiting and waiting. And there was a project out there that somebody had mentioned to me. It was called ACT. So it's basically a way to like take your existing project, your GitHub Actions workflow, and then run and test it locally on your machine without having to go and do a PR and everything and go through the whole paper trail song and dance stuff and Git. So it would basically use like Docker API to like pull the whatever images down that the workflow required, and then go in, figure out the execution path, dependencies and whatnot, and then actually run that workflow, that GitHub Actions workflow directly on your machine. So you can go through, figure things out before you start just throwing everything up into, committing everything. So that was really, really, really useful and saved me a lot of time anyway. And allowed me to get through and figure out issues quicker. So,
yeah, 100% agree. And I mean, with FusionAuth, it's the same, right? So you could run it on Docker locally, or you can run it in GitHub Actions using our recipe, or I forget what they call them, but like the predefined actions. But it's the exact same in both, right? It's just our Docker container, which is identical. And I mean, even if you look at AWS, like there are businesses whose sole purpose in life is to allow you to sort of mock and simulate AWS, all of the AWS services locally. So that way you can basically build on your laptop, run things locally and simulate it, and then before you push it up to actual Amazon.
Yeah. This hits on the theme of hybrid. We actually, Yvonne and I just talked to someone yesterday that had a software as a service product, and it was built in the cloud for the cloud, essentially. But one thing that they started running into is their customer base was they were getting a lot of requests to be able to use it locally, to self-host it, to install it locally, to basically have the same experience, SaaS and on-prem, and be, completely, ubiquitous. And, that's an interesting, it's almost like I don't believe that like cloud is going to go away. I don't believe that on-prem is going to go away. It's a balancing act. You're going to have both probably forever now. And yeah, that's the future, I think.
Well, I think
there's a whole section of the market that just can't use cloud, or like they just don't want to use cloud because, they want their data, specifically their, PII in their own data center, right? And or maybe in a specific country. We have one of the coolest use cases, in my opinion. So we have a customer that has low Earth orbit satellites, and they, before their last launch, they installed FusionAuth on those satellites and then shot them up into space. So we have FusionAuth running in space. It's pretty amazing. So like that's the thing, is like if we weren't hybrid and we didn't have the opportunity to have a really small containerized version of FusionAuth, that we couldn't have solved that problem.
When I think part of what we're seeing, and yeah, to a degree, this was something that I've talked about over the last several years, is that the thing that cloud has allowed customers to do is really change their operating model to get away from this entrenched on-premises operating model. And then you move to cloud, there are new processes, there are new systems, there's a different operating model that's more agile, that allows you to move more quickly, all of that. And now what we're seeing is that cloud operating model now moving back into on-premises environments so that customers, end users have the same experience. But cloud was like this step to transform the way people worked and change how they interact with their infrastructure. And now they're like, oh, this works really well, but for the services we need on-prem, how do we update how we work so that we can be as efficient here as we are there? And so much of it has been as much about operating as it has been about the specific technical capabilities. I mean, and we can talk hours about those technical capabilities as well, but the operating model has been incredibly important.
Yeah, and as the cloud providers add more and more services and require you to run more and more services, right? Like just to get very simple things like redirects done in some of these cloud providers, it requires like a CDN directory with some lambdas and some edge lambdas to talk to an S3 bucket to go pull this stuff. I mean, you can have all of these necessary components now, which are complicated, right? And so the operating model of cloud first and cloud native actually is fairly complicated. It requires all these, cloud management or operations folks, and same that we used to have like an entire set of engineers just managing our servers and maintaining those. And so one of the other things around sort of the operational model is upgrades, right? And so we like to equate it to upgrades and versioning to the same way that you would for like a MySQL. It would be shocking if your cloud provider just automatically bumped you from let's say MySQL 5 to MySQL 8, right? That would just be shocking. Like as a developer, you'd freak out and you'd be like, wait a second, why'd you do that? I haven't tested against 8. I don't even know if it's going to work. There's probably a bunch of data things I need to figure out. And, I have to make sure it runs locally and in my dev environment before I push it to production. And so why would you want to let a cloud provider just magically upgrade your cloud services at any time, right? So upgrades should be a controlled operational step. And in a lot of cases, they're not, right? Because cloud providers, they're just constantly rolling new versions. They are continuously deploying. So we look at it the same way that we like to look at databases, which is in our cloud, because our cloud is single tenant, we don't upgrade all of our customers all at one time. We allow the customers to choose when they upgrade, and then they can make sure that the local version is correct and all their tests pass and it runs properly, and then they can upgrade their production to that same version, right? And so we've done, and it's still in a hybrid model, but we're kind of giving the power back to developers to manage these operational components.
That's actually where I was going next, was upgrades, like how to, balancing the, upgrade approach of having, what you're doing in the cloud. Like say a customer had something running in cloud and on-prem, how do you, marry those together and make sure they're, tracking together okay. So you answered that quite nicely. And I guess the next thing that I wanted to get out before I forget is the death of passwords. Like, are they really going to meet the guillotine? Like, what are your thoughts on, passwords and their slow and painful death that they're having in favor of, this passwordless future? Where is this authentication thing heading in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think passkeys and, those steps towards passwordless are great. And they're heading in the right direction, right? Because you can't device lock something. People lose their phones and need to go get new phones and, upgrade or switch providers or whatever it might be. So we started off saying like, okay, well, we'll device lock this passwordless. You have to have that device that you created the account on or that you've linked the account to in your possession at all time. And even if you log in your laptop, you still have to have your phone in order to like complete that passwordless thing, right? Or multi-device, right? So that's kind of like how YouTube does it. It's like, go find that other device that you have that has YouTube on it and click the yes, it's me button. And so it's still pretty clunky, but passkeys, especially cloud passkeys, are heading in the right direction. And just, for the folks that don't know what that is, basically, you go to a website, it prompts you, like, if you'd like to stop typing in passwords, you say yes. You create a passkey, which is a little, it's basically a key pair, and then you use it for signing, and that's how the browser and the back end determine that it's you. That's right. It's a digital signature. And once that passkey is created, we can push it up somewhere and so that it can be shared across your devices. And then when you hop to another device, that passkey is just available and you just click the button and say sign in, right? And to unlock your passkey is usually some sort of biometric. It's, Touch ID or Face ID or something like that. So those mechanisms are great, right? Because we're getting rid of the passwords. The kicker there is that because it's cloud-based, you have to log into that cloud thing somehow. And usually that requires a password, right? So like iCloud requires a password. LastPass, OnePass, like all of these systems still require a password to unlock your vault or your cloud key system. And then now you can use your passkey. So in order to get to a true passwordless world where there's no passwords, period, it's going to require the operating systems, right? The Apples, the Microsofts, and the Googles of the world to figure that out. How do we actually just kill the password completely, have these cloud passkeys and all the other things? Maybe your face becomes your password, right? Those things don't exist yet, but I could see that at some point there could be a solution for that, because you always have to do that first step, which is like unlock the thing that stores all of your passkeys.
Yep, for sure. And there will be interesting shifts in risk profiles and threat profiles based on that change, right? Because you've got the keys of the kingdom stored in one place, then you've got to really be sure that place is super safe. So I want to pivot the conversation a little bit. So you talked a little bit about, growing up in a family that was entrepreneurial, but I'd love to talk more about, your, your decision to take the leap to become, a founder, and what that process was like. It's one thing to, build a product on the side and in your spare time and then start charging for it. It's another to go to VCs and say, hey, I'd like a good chunk of cash because I have a really great idea that I think is gonna be super productive and make us all, money and be super successful. So what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, when I started writing CleanSpeak, I always figured I have to write something that people are going to pay for, right? Because I mean, this was 2006, 2007, and you couldn't just like walk down the street and get 10 million bucks of VC like you can today. I mean, it's harder than that. But like if you say AI, Larry, like they'll just shower you with money. So the first thing I did was like, okay, well, I have a need for this, and I think other people have a need for this. I'm going to build something, but I'm not going to like quit my day job, nor am I going to go like, try and get all this money for it. I'm just going to see if people will actually pay for it. So I built a website, accepted credit cards, put a contact us form, and, a couple months later, Nintendo calls up and they say, hey, we're really interested in this product and we'd like to buy an enterprise license. And I was like, I don't know what an enterprise license is, but it sounds amazing. Yeah, let's totally do that. It sounds great. So I had to go figure out what that meant and like go hire lawyers and like do the whole shtick, right? But that's product validation right there. And and then we had the next game company come and say the same thing, and another one come and say like, hey, we're going to pay you to actually like build the features we want. And I'm like, well, that sounds amazing. I love doing that, And so it never really occurred to me to like take someone else's money and make a run at something that has a 1 in 10 shot of actually being successful. Like that's not how like my dad did it. That's not how my mom did it. My grandfather on my dad's side, my grandfather, like nobody did it that way. They're like, I need to go out and make money. So I'm going to build a company that I know people are going to pay me to do, services for them. And so I did the same thing, and it's a completely different mindset. And I didn't quit the day job until I knew that there was something there, and I had, people paying me real money. So like tens of thousands of dollars. And of course, like it didn't work out immediately. I didn't like have, magically 10 employees and millions of dollars in ARR. Well, and back then it wasn't even ARR. It was like a one-time purchase. So it took years, and I did a lot of contracting on the side. I have pretty decent skills, so I can like, kind of get people to pay me money just to code them little websites. So I did that for a long time. And then, sort of as I learned more about business and figured out how to do things, I just kept doing that over and over and like rinse and repeat. It didn't really ever occur to me to like stop and then like, try and go get VC, go get money. So that's how I built it originally. But the initial plunge was, hey, somebody just wrote me like a $35,000 check. I don't know how long that's going to last, so let's do it. And so I, pulled the ripcord, quit my job, and went full time. And yeah, it took a little while, but it did work out.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's a hustle. It's a grind. There's risk. I don't know. Anytime I hear someone say, "Well, I'm just going to go found I want to be a startup founder and then just go do this thing," it's a life-changing endeavor. I mean, I don't know if I would be brave enough. I don't know if brave's the right word, but you just have to know if you're in a situation where you can do it, because it's almost like you have to fully commit into this thing. You can't go in halfway or 90% of the way. You have to go in 110% of the way, because you have a lot of competition. Everyone else around you is going in 110%. So
that's right. Yeah, and it's like, insane optimism, right? So like you're on a level of like, this is going to work every day you wake up, and even though yesterday it didn't work, this today is going to work, and we're going to get there. And like, if you don't have that continuous flow of, I'm going to make this work, this is going to work, we're going to succeed, you'll never survive. Like that's why so many people, there's like, I can't do that. Like I literally can't do that. I can't wake up every day and have more optimism, even though I've been beaten down for the last 6 months. Right. That's, and I think that's where a lot of burnout comes in. There's a lot of like mental health problems within the startup community and especially in founders. I mean, they really, you can get super depressed and like there's PTSD that comes out of this stuff. But if you have that level of optimism, you tend to make it through. You tend to be able to push through and like get there. But it's not for everybody, for sure.
Yeah. You bootstrapped FusionAuth and then you did take some external funding. But one thing I wanted to get your take on is bootstrapping is such an awesome thing if you're able to do it, So I think you've been, I don't know if this came from you or not, but something about like growth at all costs mentality and going the other way and like taking the bootstrapping mentality. Is that you? I've read so much in the past 3 days, my brain's like overloaded. But
yeah,
I love that mentality because, you can be one of these companies that just takes 30, 40 million. You have an AI startup and like your only goal is like customer acquisition. You're losing money on every deal that you take, because you're going to build something that's so great and you have so many customers that it's not going to matter and somebody's going to buy you. So this is like one way of this happens a lot. And then there's the other way of thinking of like, okay, it might, be good to look at our burn rate and pay attention to, we have books that we have to keep and stuff like that. We actually want to be good on those books. We want to be default alive at some point. But yeah, so was that you? I think that's kind of outspoken about that. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I talk about that a lot, right? Because the growth at all costs and the VC model of growth, depending, I mean, some people do it right, but yeah, it's like customer acquisition, do anything it takes, and the product might be not complete, right? It might be MVP or just past that, and they're selling it, and they go out and hire 100 salespeople and they throw money into marketing everywhere. But that's why we have the 10% success rate or whatever it is at this point. And actually getting to like 5 million is probably less than 10%, 5%. Getting to 100 million is probably 1%. I mean, like it falls off so fast, right? But if you bootstrap and you have you make $1 and you have to figure out, it's like, okay, am I going to pay somebody else that $1 to like help me do something new? Should I go put 50 cents of that into marketing? Should I put 25 cents of that into, insurance? I mean, like you have to think about every tiny little thing that you're spending and, how you're dividing things up, that you think really, really critically about what you're doing, right? You don't go out and hire 10 salespeople or 100 salespeople. You don't go put your ad in, on billboards on the 101. You don't do these things because it doesn't make sense. It's not going to get you the next singular deal that's going to help you go hire that next person or do run some Google ads for next month or two. So it's a completely different view of the world. But every time you can make payroll and every time you're profitable or break even on your balance, or on your P&L, and your balance sheet looks pretty healthy, like you're making, you're doing the right thing. You're making money, you're sustainable. So if you have 10 employees, you have to make enough money to like sustain those 10 employees. And so in my opinion, it's just a better model, right? You have to have product market. You have to have product market fit. You don't find it later. You don't throw enough money at it and get enough customers, no matter how crappy your software is, to like get there. People won't stick around and they won't pay you any money unless your software works. So.
Well, and with the model that you've embraced, you're building a thing that's useful because people are actually buying it and they're real and they're giving you real feedback. So it's not a turtles all the way down situation. Like you have something real and substantial there. And there's a ton of reward and validation in that in and of itself, right? Yes. Especially if you are growing a business and paying salaries and keeping the machine going enough to continue to grow. I mean, there's a lot of just reward and win in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because, you get how many employees do you have? And, how are you guys doing revenue? You didn't take any VC. Are you guys going to go away next year? So you get a lot of these questions, but the answers are pretty easy. It's like, well, we have exactly as many employees as we can afford, and we're making money. So like, it'd be really hard for us to just magically disappear next year. And we have no VC telling us to shut down and no board hammering us over the head to do things. So yeah, as long as you guys keep paying us, we're going to keep being here. Right. I mean, that's it. Like, if you love the software, pay us for it and we'll keep building it.
That's great. And yeah, for everyone out there, if you're at a startup, if you double the size of your sales team, that does not equate to doubling your ARR. If you didn't know that, so just food for thought.
Well, yeah, and sales is a super complicated thing, and it actually takes a significant amount of skill and expertise to properly incentivize and run a sales team. Because if salespeople will sell what they're paid to sell, and if you're not comping your salespeople in alignment with what actually delivers revenue, then you end up in a very upside down, ugly situation, because you've got to comp people for doing a thing you told them to do that isn't actually delivering revenue. And it's its own art form, frankly. Like it's art and science, and requires a certain degree of expertise to effectively run, a very effective sales team. That sounds like very, to me, it sounds like a very basic thing to say, but I see a lot of folks looking past that. Like, oh, just go hire salespeople. They'll go do it. It's like,
Yeah, it's like a warm body problem, right? It's like, throw salespeople at it. They'll figure it out. Like, anybody can do sales. It's like, oh no, this is a very complicated component. And most people, it's just like anything else. It's like, you gotta follow up, and you gotta be nice, and you gotta like figure out how to get them back in the loop and get them excited about the product. And like, it's a lot of expertise. Like, you gotta really work at that to get good at it.
Yeah. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know we're coming kind of close to the top of the hour, but there's something I thought was interesting as well. I think you said in April you had the first AuthCon, think of it as the world's first customer identity and access management focused conference, like narrowing in on this in particular. I've seen these be really successful. So like, I've been involved in one called AuthCon, or Automation Conference, and looking at like why basically like automation and like bare metal iron environments has been like slow to take off, and like what the challenges are, and the conversations that have come out of that, just understanding the problem, getting the right, it's not huge, it's not thousands of people, but it's enough people, and it's enough of the right people to have good conversations and to solve problems. But I wanted to get your take on like, what was the goal behind starting AuthCon, and what conversations in your opinion sort of need to happen in the industry around this, that maybe aren't happening at the bigger conferences.
Yeah, so there's a lot of identity conferences. You got Identiverse, Identity Week, Gartner IAM, and those are all great, but they cater quite a bit to sort of the CISOs, the workforce identity, and then they have like a small subset within that of developers and product people that are actually building the apps and that need that customer identity. And so it's sort of an afterthought, and the content is geared towards, for example, large banks and fraud, or like, big 100,000 employee companies, and how do you manage that workforce, and how do you effectively MFA everyone, and those kind of things. And those are great discussions, but completely different than what a day-to-day developer needs to do just to get a login page. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to build a conference specifically for the latter, right? We wanted to say, you're a developer, you're building an app, here are the problems that you face, here's how to solve them, here are the standards, here are the tools. You know, we just want people to have better security and better user experience. And so really it's very vendor agnostic, and it's just showing engineers how to solve real world problems. And all of the content is specifically around those developer focused problems. We did it inside API week or API days this year, which is great. They had let us have a track inside their conference. Had a ton of people come in. It was just a single day track. I think we had 10 speakers or something like that. And so it was a great way to kick it off and a great place to start it off. And then I think next year we're gonna try and scale it up and maybe see if we can do our own standalone. And if not, we'll again try to find a nice conference home that we can slot into, maybe API days again. But yeah, we're going to continue to do it, and we're hoping we get more and more vendors. Even though there are competitors, we get more and more vendors to come in and join in the conversation and help these engineers build better apps.
I love that. And so the last question I have is, I always find this as a curious one, and I usually ask some variation of it, but like looking at this landscape, this authentication landscape, like we have the big companies, everything's zero trust. They're pushing for zero trust. Everything's got to be zero trust. And then you talk to developers, and developers at this point, they don't want to own everything anymore. They want it out of their way. They want some simplicity for the things that they're not directly connected to, that they shouldn't have to worry about. And security teams are demanding like way more controls. How do you reconcile these competing demands going into the future? Because I don't know how you do this in a perfect way.
I mean, I think the only way to do it, again, I'm a little bit biased, is a hybrid approach, right? Give developers exactly what they need to just code and build their app. And for us, that's running FusionAuth locally. You can run it, in Docker. You can run it, just out of zip files. We have a lot of package installs, but you want to be able to run that locally. You want to be able to reset it very quickly. You want to be able to configure it via code, right? So either like a Terraform, or we have our own system called Kickstart, which allows you to configure FusionAuth and get it to a pristine state. And you want to be able to run your tests against it and actually run real functional tests against it, and then reset it and rinse and repeat. But then when you go to production, again, we have a lot of customers that already have a full Kubernetes system, and they just want to deploy FusionAuth inside their existing system, right? So they just have some pods and they put FusionAuth inside there, and they're already up and running because we work natively with Kubernetes. Or there's the people that are like, I don't want to touch a server ever, and I want you to manage everything. Please do that. And we're fine with that too. So they can offload that. They can then, because we're API first, they can move that configuration between dev and production. Because we have the Terraform provider, you can do, changes. So you can have your current state and then, the new state, and you can figure out what changed between them. And so because we're catering to everything those developers need and not pigeonholing them into like, well, it's cloud only, you got to set up a dev environment in our cloud just to even start coding against, we think we're hitting the best of both worlds. And we're covering all the needs, not just, one section of the needs.
Love it. Pays to be flexible a little bit, especially in 2025. All right. I think that's all I got. You got anything, Yvonne? You got anything else?
I'm all good.
All right. Yeah, we're getting to the top of the hour. Where can folks find you out there if they want to learn more?
So if you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's /n/voidmain. That's my name. And then, you can go to FusionAuth.io. If you want to learn about FusionAuth, it's free. You can download it. You can get started today. And those are the two best places to find us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is great.
All right.